Hi everyone and welcome back to Jinkajabo. Glad that you're all here. There's a lot going on in the news. Sex robots is a thing in the news now, and they're still talking about taking a knee in sports and all that. Then there was the Me Too hashtag. But I wanted to go a little bit more local and talk about some things happening here in Hanoi, here in Vietnam. And I also want to talk a little bit about Stefan Molyneux's video today, in which he talks about the feeling of envy. Okay, Trump, Trump, Trump. That's out of the way. We'll talk about something that happened this last weekend here in Hanoi, I think. I know it was in Vietnam. I'm pretty sure it was Hanoi. But a UK man from Scotland, a Scotsman, went missing for a couple of days. And it blew up all over my Vietnam message boards that I follow. And from what I could piece together, I mean, it was hard. Yeah, he didn't speak directly, even though he was found and everything was all right at the end. I didn't see any of his posts or any of his friends directly, but the talk was that he was out drinking with his mates, like you do on weekends, and he was here not as a teacher, some other profession, just a temporary thing. I guess he wasn't here that long anyway. But he was out drinking with his friends, and they got in a cab, and I believe it must have been from the Old Quarter, and if you take an Old Quarter taxi the wrong time of night, you end up being charged too much, as in like $10 or $15 as opposed to like $3 or $4 is the difference that we're talking about much of the time. Perhaps a little more than that, but nothing compared to even the cheapest fare that you would pay for a taxi in the States, anywhere, even in small towns. I would know. I did drive taxi for a brief period, both in Wisconsin and in Illinois. But anyway, they got into a scuffle with the taxi driver, and I imagine they were quite soused at that point. And one of the guys, he just refused to pay. And so a couple of the guys got out, and the one who was left over, who refused to fork over the however hundreds of thousands of dong, and I doubt it was millions, but even millions isn't that much to get into a big scuffle about. And this guy ended up kidnapped, I guess, and was missing for a couple of days. But then he showed up again, missing some money, and he was all right. And everyone was upset about it. But then of course there was a lot of mudslinging talk, like, well, you shouldn't have gotten into a fight with the cab driver. And then it goes back to the same point that always comes up in discussion boards about Vietnam, and that's, the people here are they're just out to rip off foreigners, and it's all about fleecing us. They just want to take our money. And our way of doing things is much better because okay, well, we're more civilized where we're from. There's this veiled bigotry, there's this veiled hatred to it, which in this video at least I wanted to speak out against. Which isn't to say that I don't feel sorry for him, and I'm glad that he's safe. But I ended up feeling a lot of envy from his situation, which is weird to say, because I mean, I'm sure he went through a lot, going missing for a couple of days over a financial thing that, well, you get dramatic when you're drunk, of course, and so of course it's easy to get carried away with your anger and with your emotions and whatnot. I'm not above that. I've been there, but I've gone missing. I went missing in Korea for a little while and wound up in a hospital, and nobody knew who I was or what I was about. And that didn't get on the news. I don't think that even really got on the local news. And I hate to bring it up again because it's been damn near 10 years, but it's just one of those situations that I look back at and I just feel, it still hurts. But the pain takes different forms. It's not like I have nightmares about it, or it's not like I hold any specific resentment or racism towards Korea now. Even though in the early stages I grappled with those ideas, but it's not on the plate anymore. As Mark Twain said, travel is fatal to prejudice, and I've had enough travel to stamp out enough prejudice. But anyway, this guy, they linked an article. He was on the BBC page. And I guess he was from a smaller town in Scotland. Scotland. I'm sorry. I know I've actually sent Scottish friends to watch this channel. I'm sorry about that. But that's a culture thing. That's a judgment on my part. Well, okay, in America, stuff like this simply wouldn't make the news. And I guess it could have made the news way back in 2008 when it happened to me, but it's kind of odd that I wouldn't have expected it then, and I don't expect it now. And to see fawning support for other people, it's sort of like when I went through my experience, I was alone. The whole scenario, I was on my own, and this guy was with his mates, and they were all having fun, and they're all drinking, and I was alone, and I was sober, and I thought I was in control of my surroundings, but bad things happen. I got mugged, I got robbed and beaten, and that's how I ended up missing for a couple days. Why am I bringing all this up? This is actually kind of painful stuff. But it makes me think of a great video that I saw from Stefan Molyneux today. And he's talking about envy. And I used that word earlier to think, well, I really envy this guy, even though something bad happened to him. And that's kind of an attack on him. It really is. And I didn't say anything in any of these message boards or whatnot, but I did crack a few jokes about it and all that. And you do this, and you say that, well, it never reaches them, so what could it hurt? But really, it's about hurting yourself. Because as Stefan brilliantly put, envy works like this. You can see other people that have something and think to yourself, man, I really want to have that, and I really want to work towards that. Or you can see them and think, fuck this person, they don't deserve it, I'm going to bring them down. And I catch myself doing it, and I'm catching myself doing it more and more, and it's healthy to catch yourself doing it. But it just shocks me, because the more you realize you're doing it, the more you see other people doing it. And it kind of goes back to my review of What Happened by Hillary, where people have themselves written all over themselves, but they're not aware of it. People are so obvious sometimes, and yet they're the only ones who don't get it. Or it reminds me of there's that hilarious part in the 90s movie Brain Candy, The Kids in the Hall, where the gay man is sitting there and he has no idea, like, he's in complete denial that he's gay. And the guy is saying, and the doctor says to him, your wife knows it, your kids know it, everybody knows it, dogs know it. The only one who doesn't know it is you. And we can look at that and laugh. And of course, like in comedy scenarios or in the foibles of memoirs of our failed leaders, we can look at that and laugh. But it's really a common and serious scenario. But Stefan talks about, and I missed the opening when he set this up because I was busy doing something else, but he talks about climbing alongside a fence by a ravine on a rainy day and seeing inside the window of a family who's gathered for dinner. And the mom is making dinner, and the dad is chasing a kid around the table, and they're all laughing and happy. And Stefana, who I guess he was like 12 or 13 at this point, he was young, very young at this point, looked at that and said to himself, I want that. And it wasn't a matter of, oh, well, here's how I get that, but he saw it, he described it as like seeing an opening in a sewer that he's in. And I thought that was a very moving story, because we all go through hell in our lives sometimes. I really think that. And it helps to understand it, but, you can either have dreams that are attainable, dreams that you can work towards and have plans towards those dreams, or you can just always have that hover above you and just, poison everything around you. So going back to our UK friend, like our Scottish friend, I'm glad he's okay. And I think that looking at that, we can all take a lesson to learn. First of all, as I know, as I got ripped off myself because I didn't feel like walking all the way home from the old quarter, and I got a cab too close to the lake. But I $8 ripped off later. I decided, let me out of the car, and I walked the remaining, what was it, like 40 minutes home, which is a common thing, and it happens to everyone out here. And the people who don't react to it right, the people who make a scuffle over $5 or $10, considering that most of us are making wages that are comparable, or in a lot of cases better than what we would make back home. I just think that's so completely petty. And then, like, every day on these on these Vietnam message boards, people are posting things like, the Vietnamese just want to rip us off. They're all about ripping us off, and people are just completely unaware of how bigoted that really is. As if to say their way of doing business, their way of driving, their way of serving customers, their way of living their lifestyles are wrong. Obviously wrong, because we have the better way. And yet we still squabble with each other. Yet we're still pointing out how the English speak language, or how the British speak English wrong, or the Americans speak English wrong, or the Australians speak English wrong. We're all taking the piss out of each other. We're all unable to find real consensus, and yet obviously we do things the right way, and so we need to show them. And so people make these posts, and it's just taught me over the years what it really is about, and how natural prejudice can be, especially when you feel envy towards other people, or when you feel like you're being mistreated. You feel like you're being victimized and singled out because you're an outsider, which is really a leap of faith when you sit down and dissect it. I have lived in many countries now. A few countries now. Many different cities. And the best advice that I ever got was actually very early in my career, and it's what sustained me, and it's what has kept me as a traveling teacher now, in spite of some, bad experiences I've had along the way. In spite of all that, it's what's kept me going, and it's what's kept me successful and doing okay and employed and all this, able to get ahead by traveling. And that bit of advice came from a bar in Daejeon, South Korea, where I used to go on the weekends, and it was kind of a lonely bar. It was dark. It wasn't like hippie bars out here that have live bands and all that. It was really kind of a dank little place in this rodeo street, like the western district. Even though there weren't many Westerners there, but I met a Canadian there one night. And he had been traveling for a few years. I think he had been in Korea for a few years at that point. And we're talking a little bit about just culture and how hard it is to understand. And he said to me, look, you have to understand that there is a wall between you and them. There will always be that wall. It will always divide you. You will never get around it completely. You can look over it. You can wave your hands around. You can communicate to the other side. You can see across it. You can speak across it. But it's always there. And you have to accept that. And I think if anyone wants to travel and work and live overseas, if there is one thing that I could have known before starting any of this, it was that there's a wall. People do things differently, and you have to accept that. You have to be willing to understand that. So, just a few thoughts. Talk to you soon. Later.